Deepo, you can start. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Boaz, for the quick introduction. So, good afternoon, good morning, everyone here. A quick intro about me. I'm Deepu Singh, leader of emerging technologies at Fujitsu North America. And today is January 2026, 16th. And I think so. If we just look back almost like 24 months, I will say um, the conversation we were having was different, right? We were typing into like chat boxes and um, those conversations were totally different because of the generative AI booming into that space, right? But today the conversation has shifted a lot. We are probably no longer talking about those conversations, but we are more talking about what actual work we are doing in this space, how much we are creating that shift, right? We are architecting the enterprises, we are witnessing the autonomous evolution from AI as a simple task executor to becoming like an core component of your business architecture, right? So today, as part of this session, I'm going to take you through the frontier of the AI agents. And we are not just going to talk about the hype, what AI agents bring on the table. We are going to look at the impacts. Uh, we are going to look at how this changes the way we build the software, manage the different processes over the period of time, and how do we measure the value in what different dimensions we should do that, and take that respective call whether we are doing good, not good, or we are still growing in that space, or we have grown, fully grown, right? So with that, I will just dive into the next slide, which is about the agenda. So here is our roadmap of our today's discussion. I will say we'll start by defining what an agent actually is, because let's be honest, that term has been abused by the marketing departments for the last one, or even I think more than 1 year. We'll try to map the impact zones where this technology is bringing today things, or shifting the things. Where will it work tomorrow? We'll look at the patterns of the work, specifically like four patterns that define the human agent collaboration. And finally, we will see AI agents impact on the solution architecture. And how does the introduction of an autonomous agent, it change the traditional architecture, which is like a model view controller. We always have been doing it for decades. That is going, drifted, and it is how it is getting shifted to a much more modern architecture. So, but first, let's clear up the definition. Let's understand what AI agents is all about. And I want to draw your attention to the bottom of this slide first, which is the concept of the software agents. That isn't new. Like if you go, I think I was reading a book which was somewhere in 1980s. We had distributed systems which we were creating at that moment, and there we had an academic theory of the agent. So this is not new things which we are talking about. But back then, when we were doing all of these things using some agents, we were actually hard coding the logic, right? In the past, we were having deterministic bots. Like think of a classic robotic process automation, which is RPA typical. Like it is a combination of if this, then that, right? So it's quite rigid. It's very fragile. Sometimes work doesn't work, right? So it is definitely based on the deterministic patterns. The present, we have moved to assistive mode, which is more of a co-pilot. They help you write an email, but you still have to, hit the send button there to make that work. And the future, which I feel, which is now increasingly becoming the now, we are in the agentic. So what makes an agent? It is not just an LLM for sure. An LLM, I will say, is a brain which is put it into a jar. It can think, but it can definitely not move, right? So an agent definitely requires some extra pillars to make it work, and LLM core is one of them, which provides the reasoning, which provides the brain to it. It gives that planning portion. Um, with brain, it comes the memory, right? So you need to definitely have a memory, but with a caveat that it should be a long-term memory, like it should not forget. An agent needs to know what it did yesterday. It needs to maintain the state across the multi-step transactions which it has, processed through, right? So it needs to have that memory or the history. And the most important layer, which we are still, emerging, is the integration layer, and this is the hand and the feet of the agent. And this translates the LLM plan into a much more structured API calls. And if the agent cannot perceive it, decide it, or probably act upon it, we should not call it an agent. It is just a chatbot. That is a clear differentiator to make the distinction between what's an agent can perform versus what it cannot, right? And how we should circle them and quantify them, like, yeah, these are the agents we are talking about. All right. So the next slide is about how are we mapping the impact of the AI agents. As an architects, we cannot just say agentic AI all over the enterprise, and just say, like, let's hope for the best and agent do their work and we are all sorted. That does not work, right? We need to map things here. And that's why I created this matrix to help everyone understand here. This matrix, it is critical for your AI strategy. On the right, if you see on the top right, we have structured control work, right? Think of customer billing or a high precision work. If you get like a decimal point wrong there, you are getting sued for it, right? And the traditional automations, which are like RPA based, this is still being owned by the RPAs, right? They have a strong hold on this, and we definitely don't want a probabilistic LLM, guessing your, say, suppose your tax rate. That's not justifiable, right? On the left, on the left top, if you see, we have the unstructured monitor work, which is more of like campaigns, R&Ds, some creative writing, and this is the white space. I will say this is where where the agents are making their initial impact, and it is cruising through there. And why? Because the risk is lower. If an agent writes a mediocre email, you can edit it, right? And no one dies at the end of the day, right? But look at the bottom boxes. If you see, those are the emerging impacts which are coming in the future. Like, we are seeing the agents are moving into much more guided work. Think about it like a caseworker or a case management. He's managing the entire case. Some document processing, which is very interesting. And if you analyze these specific works, guided works, and the processes which are related to it, they are starting to handle some specific tasks within a rigid process, right? And they are working alongside the hard-coded rules which we already see, right? And they are making a definite impact. So there is definitely a potential, and we need to definitely classify ourselves and categorize ourselves where we are actually picking those areas of work and making ourselves in a space where we are fully compliant with the current rules and regulations in place, right? All right, so just to correlate to the previous conversation about agents, we need to also understand AI agents in context, and we should double click on the term context in here, because when we build these systems, we are typically bundling almost like three layers in there. The first one is the interaction, where the agent, it perceives the environment, it reads the entire email for you, it sees the incident tickets say suppose from an ITSM platform like ServiceNow, and understands it, right? What the ticket information is all about. So it's interacting with a specific platform or some source of information which you have provided. There is definitely planning which is required, and this is a differentiator in my opinion. In the RPA bots, we did the planning during the design phase, and we actually draw a lot of flowcharts like this. After this, you need to do this and do that, right? But in agentic AI, the agent, it creates the flowchart on the fly. Like it asks, like, to achieve this particular goal, what steps do I need to take, and what should I do so that there is a success at the very end, right? And then it creates a list of the actions and different set of items which it needs to perform, or maybe tasks which it needs to perform, right? And this connects to the next portion of it, which is action, which is ultimately invoking the system, right? You are actually triggering a system or an events, a sequence of events, or maybe parallel events, just to make those things work, right? But if you ask me, where is the magic in all of this, in setting the context to an agent, it is all in the middle layer where the planning goes. That is the shift from, I would say, a predefined state or a mode to an autonomous mode, right? You actually are giving a lot of power to agents to give you more critical information, which probably, if you are doing on the ground, you may have missed it, right? And you are giving all those proper context to them, right? Right. So how have modern AI agents?
I think that there was some question maybe from fear. If
yeah, I don't know. Is this the good? First of all, nice to meet you, Deepu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And second, is
That's fine. Yeah.
To ask a question, or maybe you want questions at the end? Let me know.
Boys, how do we do it in this? Maybe I'm doing this for the
whatever
first
works
time.
for you.
I'm okay with answering right now also on the fly. That's fine.
Yeah, let's take one and then continue. So fear.
Okay, so if you go to the previous slide with the planning, one of the things I'm noticing is the planning can codify workflows, especially in enterprise software. There are workflows and habits that you want to instill in. Part of the planning is potentially a place for us to codify this unique company workflows. So when you say planning, I want to know if it's infused by the engineering and designing the planning, or is it basically managed by the LLM itself? Like, how do you think about planning, and what's the role of engineering in planning?
Right. That's a very good question. I think the planning here is a very broad term. You are right. But if you look at the course of the events, what is required as part of planning is it needs to give you a sequence of events. It needs to give you a structure what it needs to perform, right? It cannot jump from, say, suppose from step one and start directly to a step two, right? It cannot do that. So there has to be a proper set of plan with different low-level activities which it needs to keep in mind, and that is what is planning is all about. Before even trying to execute it, it needs to be critical enough to understand what is doable versus what is not doable given the space it is going into, right? And take that call and then ask for permission, like, is this the right step? Are these properly sequenced? Are these properly managed properly? Do you think this is a workable strategy or not? If it is not, then make some changes. If not, then you are good to go. Let's go into the action and perform it one after the other.
And maybe I'll sharpen my question.
Sure.
You said it's short, but I'll sharpen my question. The plan of action should come from the agent itself, or
from the agent itself. It is automated. It is automated. It's a it's an automation there. So we are not disrupting anything in there. That thinking process of the agent is totally based on the brain power of the LLM. So we are not making any changes to that, right? But as I have seen, mostly working with different companies or enterprises, I will say that LLM has been trained a lot. Like, it has been made specific to that particular organization or an enterprise, right? And it is made aligned with more, say, suppose for a healthcare specific domain, it may be responding differently compared to what for a retail one, right? So there will be definitely differences in the LLM answers, and I think the LLM has to be trained for that specific domain or for the use case which you are targeting for, right? That needs to be, pretty refined, and then only your LLM will work, or maybe the agent plan will work. Otherwise, if you are invoking a retail agent into a healthcare, God bless you. I mean, you are probably going into a space where you should not be going to, right? So,
Thanks, Ken. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. All right. I'll move to the next slide, which is much more interesting, like how the modern AI agents is going in this context window, like how, and it is just a contrast to this, what we just already see in the previous slide. Like, if you look at the left, the classic RPAs, it is a combination of interaction, planning, and also an action. But the planning, it has an asterisk, because if you see, it's not a real planning. It's quite predefined rules. You have to do this, like you have to do A, then B, then C, right? There is a predefined set of rules which you need to follow. And same goes with the virtual agents as well, but it has an interaction which is enabled with pre-generative AI, and that is the foundation, right? And for the modern agents, if you go, and if you move further, look at the middle of it, the modern AI assistants, they have content actions. They have, and they can summarize the text for you, right? But can they go into, like, say, suppose SAP systems and update a transaction? Usually they don't do that, right? That's not expected from these kind of assistants. But if you see on the very far right, which is the modern AI agents, the foundation is definitely an LLM. The planning is real time, and the action is through viable external tools, which is fully integrated with the system, right? And if you think about an interface, and maybe if you see that double asterisk sign in there, the interface might be conversational, but or maybe also command specific, but it has no interface attached to it, right? It does it on its own. The conversation is there, but you will not see that interface at all. It's still developing. I think there is a lot of transparency issues going in that space. So probably in a year or so, maybe we may get some interfaces around it, like why it came to that specific decision, and then take the next steps. But as of now, there is no interface. So the agent runs in the background. It is getting triggered by an event, and not even a chat window, right? So it is doing things which is event driven rather than command specific, right? And this is the shift we are seeing from chatting with AI versus AI doing you some specific work, right? This is an interesting slide. I was just trying to get some stats. Is it just a hype? And definitely the numbers are not saying, I mean, they're saying no to it directly. Gartner and Forresters, they have been gathering and surveying the data from, especially from 2025, and they show that like almost 50% of the organizations, they list it as a top investment priority. But the stat which I love here is this on the right hand side, like 82.6%, they agree that AI agents will create a new intelligence layer. And think about that, like for the last 20 years, the intelligence layer was your all applications which we were developing it, right? Maybe COTS application or maybe custom applications, you name it. It's on the Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, SQL Server, all of them where they are actually holding the data and the intelligence there, right? Now we are putting a layer on the top of that. The agents are now becoming the user of the interface. So the human doesn't have to be there, to be honest. Like, they have to be there, but just for the reviewal purposes. So ultimately, what we are trying to solve is we are breaking that silos of the data which existed between different applications, not allowing them seamlessly interacting and doing some exchange of the information if they're supposed to do. Like, it takes time to make that exchange happen or handshake happen. But now with agents into picture, if there is a viability of a handshake between two applications, that is a game changer. We are going to use agents in the application information exchange for sure. Now, some of the AI use case, like this is just a view here, like how you actually address different AI use cases with different measurable business outcomes, and what you should think or differentiate between a commodity versus a value which we are deriving. So on the left, we have the left bottom, I will say, the productivity suites or the copilot or assistants, we can say, which are generally summarizing the meetings or drafting you a code. And this is already commoditized, right? Like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they are all giving you this out of the box. You cannot just build a competitive advantage there. The lasting box for using an agent, or maybe I will say to address use cases, is definitely the green box, which is functional specific and industry specific use cases. An agent that understands the specific regulatory compliance, say suppose for a pharmaceutical supply chain in North America, if it does that, if it understands it from top to bottom, that is a big deal we are talking about. And thereby, probably if the agent goes into the system, it may optimize some specific claims adjudication or the process which we do, especially like it's a cumbersome process for claim, right? If you actually optimize that, that is the value which we are bringing on the table. So don't just buy the productivity suites there and call it an AI strategy, is what I was trying to. Just keeping the lights on doesn't help. We have to definitely think through on the custom development part of it, which is on the right side, which I'm highlighting in here. Think about those function specific and industry specific use cases, and then derive the value and see how those business values, they can be traced back to the initiatives which you are actually using as part of the AI, right? This is one of the so this is a diffusion across the landscape, and this is one of the most important slide in the entire deck. If you want to take a photo, feel free to do that. This is not just a chart. It is a risk and opportunity map for your entire IT portfolio, I will say. And to understand where the agent fits, we have to look at the geometry of the work, right? Like let's do that. Like on the horizontal axis, we have the structure of the work. On the far left, you have the controlled work. And those are like, which we already talked, like customer billing or regulatory reporting. Like this is the domain of high precision. If a robot is off by just 1 cent, you may have a compliance figure there. And this is where the classical RPAs, the blue boxes, they have lived for almost like 15 years, and it is rigid, it is deterministic, and quite frankly, it is hostile to the AI agents because we cannot tolerate the ambiguity in here, right? But if you see on the far right, you have monitored work, right? Which is more of like marketing campaigns, research and development, creative brainstorming. The outcome isn't a number in this case. It is kind of a concept here, and this has historically been purely human territory, like the green boxes, if you see precisely. It perhaps is supported by the project management tools, right? But if you see more deeply and look at the middle, look at the guided work column, this is the battleground. Like this is where the diffusion is happening. And if you follow the purple dotted line and the purple shaded box, this represents the agentic invasion there. Like we are seeing a massive shift in the service work, things like customer complaint management or IT incident response, or any kind of like employee onboarding, right? Uh, but why here? Why the middle? That's a good question. We should ask that, right? Because these processes have a goal, right? Like they are specifically solving a specific business problem. But if you imagine the path to go there or get there is quite non-linear. It's not easy also. Like it fluctuates. And in the old days, if when we try to build the RPA bots for this, we built massive if then else statement, and it's a decision tree which is very complicated, right? But the moment a customer said something, like you can correlate to that to a statement. Say suppose a customer told something unexpected and the bot crashed then and there itself. So historically, yes, the deterministic software, they have failed because the real world is kind of messy, right? So and this is where the AI agent it shines a lot. An agent, it doesn't need a rigid flow chart. It needs a specific policy which it needs to follow, and a goal which it needs to achieve, right? If you have all these two in place, I think agent is there for you to make that happen. And in the initial impact zone, if you see on the bottom right portion of it, the agent have started helping with tasks like drafting emails or summarizing tickets. But if you look at the emerging impact zone, which is in the center, we are seeing the agents becoming kind of a case owner. And here is what it looks like in practice. Like an agent, it receives a complex dispute. It doesn't just route it. It analyzes the sentiment. It checks the CRM history. It looks up the warranty policy in the PDF file. It and realizes this customer is a long-term customer and the warranty period has expired maybe yesterday. And just correlated to the previous conversation, a rigid RPA bot would simply reject the claim, but an AI agent will understand the guided goal of the customer retention and might even propose a one-time exception to it. So ultimately, it creates the plan. It stages the refund in the system, maybe in the ERP system, which it is actually pointing to. And then it crucially, I will say, it pauses. It doesn't take the next steps. It actually pings a human supervisor and says like, I recommend an exception for this long-term customer. Do you approve? Right? That is the functionality or the change AI agents are typically bringing in this strategy there. Like this is a diffusion strategy. Agents are moving from the unstructured left, eating up the function specialist roles, and they are now anchoring themselves in the middle, which is orchestrating the workflows that are used to require expensive human glued logic, in my opinion, right? So as you look at your enterprise architecture, my advice will be definitely not to force your Gen AI into the controlled billing section or maybe columns, which I have referred in here on the left. That is very critical and is kind of a dangerous situation. And sometimes we actually go into a prohibited region as well, right? And I'll also not say like just leave it in the monitored creative column, which is on the left side. That is a toy as of now. We are playing with it. Where we are seeing a value and where we need to create value is definitely sitting in the middle column, the guided work. And that is the place where you need to build more and more custom codes and more custom agents. All right.
Deepo,
Is
there's
there a question?
one question from Tomer. Tomer, do you want to ask?
Yeah, I just typed it. If you don't mind sharing a couple of examples from like real world examples you guys have built, agentic AI workflows in your company. Something you can share, of course, but anything could just a little bit help understanding those complex diagrams.
Yeah, one very interesting work which we were doing was around the UI UX for a supply chain manufacturing industry, a specific customer we were working with. And what we were designing for them was the entire front end for them, right? And we were actually having a lot of, like, there were too many buttons there, right? And what we were thinking of was, do we need so many buttons just to make the customer understand, or do we need to think through more in a futuristic way and understand how this technology will evolve maybe in 18 months down the line? Will these buttons even make sense, right? So there the conversation started. It was very technology agnostic conversation. And what we ultimately boiled down or maybe made the changes was, probably we don't need all those buttons, right? We need some APIs beneath them. Maybe when I'm creating a UIX model, I'm definitely exposing the stuffs, right? But probably those buttons are not even impactful to the customers maybe in another 16 months down the line, or maybe 18 months down the line. What we need is more of APIs. APIs are understandable to agents. Agents are coming into play. So agents will pick up the APIs for you. They are going to look into the API transactions, the API data, which it is throttling up and down, right? But if you just create a feature which is to enable some buttons, that may not work for you. And that is how we actually convinced our customers, like, hey, if you do this, probably it will work today, but maybe in another 16 months or maybe 18 months down the lane, if you are creating a structure which is very hard-coded or maybe very tight and not readable by the emerging technologies, you may not gain the efficiency there, right? And you may not capitalize the value of the technology. You will be definitely outdated. You have to keep on, adding more and more releases or maybe optimizations to your UI UX. So that is just one example to relate to this structure which I am talking about. I hope I answered your question. If not, maybe you can ask me a few more in details. I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah, I might just keep the next question I have to the end of the presentation, but I do have a follow-up.
Sure. Okay. All right. Some of the entry points which I have seen in the AI agents is, where do we start, right? I mean, and I have been iterating this for quite some time. This is the creative space. It's the white spaces where we have most of the work, which is knowledge centric, and we do a lot of creations, different variations, but probably we don't automate there because it's too messy, and especially for RPA you cannot do that. So you cannot write a script for, say, suppose write a marketing blog or something like that, but now you actually can do it with agents into place. You also start in low risk environments like the internal processes, go into the HR facts or maybe IT help desk, triage, places where if the agents makes a mistake, the employee catches it, and rather than customer seeing it at the very end side of it, right? And there are a lot of tools which are in the market like Crew, AI, Asana, Monday.com. They are leading here. Like they understand that the work is often messy and quite unstructured, and there is a lot of early adoptions happening in these areas, and this is definitely emerging. With this, I will move to a much more interesting one, which is the patterns which we have been seeing in the agents. Um, as architects, like, we cannot just build systems based on some vague concepts. We have to design patterns. Um, um, and I think in the object-oriented programming, we have already like 4 patterns. We call it as Gang of 4. And in 2026, we are definitely having much more different patterns what we had as part of OOPS concepts. This is more towards agentic interaction, right? You need to understand these because they dictate where the state lives and who holds the lock on the business processes. So I'll just walk you through from left to right in here. The pattern one is around the standalone task executor. This is where we all started in, I think, 2024. It is linear, ephemeral. A human has a need, so you research this competitor or draft a particular SQL query, and thereby you actually invoke an agent there, right? And the agent executes it and thereby just terminates. So there is no persistent state there. There is no complex integration. It is just a fire and forget mechanism. While this is useful for the individual productivity, for an enterprise architecture perspective, it is much more siloed. It does not scale because the context, it dies the moment the chat window it closes. So it is very session based, right? The second pattern is the agent as executors, and they are doing it inside the automation. So this is the most critical pattern so far for modernizing your, say, suppose your legacy tech stack, right? You have millions of dollars invested in SAP Oracle, and you have a rigid RPA bot on the top of it. I'll say don't throw them away in this pattern. The deterministic software, which is the blue gearboxes, if you see, is still the boss there. I mean, it runs the process, but when it hits a wall, say suppose an RPA bot scraping an invoice, it encounters a handwritten note there. So it should not crash there anymore, right? It should make an API call to an agent. It should pass the image payload, and probably the agent will clean it, interpret it, and then pass the structured JSON back to the automation, right? Think of the agent here as a probabilistic exception handler, like handling some of the exception. It allows your rigid systems to survive contact with the messy real world. And the state, it definitely remains in the legacy system. So you are making the use of the legacy system, but the capability, you are actually borrowing it from the AI side, right? The third pattern is much more disruptive. It is AI agents as the process orchestrator, and it is just the flip of what we talked in pattern 2 here. The agent holds the state. The agent is the project manager, and just correlate to an example. Imagine an employee or onboarding agent. It wakes up when a contract is signed, and it maintains the checklist of items. It asks the IT to provision a laptop, maybe invoking a deterministic API. It asks the hiring manager to pick a start date, thereby invoking a human action. And it also waits for the response, right? So here the agent, it manages the entire life cycle. It handles the timeouts, the definite retries it has been asked to do, and the logic behind it also, right? So it is kind of a managerial AI, I will say. It changes your architecture because you are no longer coding the workflow in, say, suppose a BPM tool. You are actually giving the agent a goal and a toolbox, and letting it figure it out, the sequence of event it needs to follow. The fourth one pattern, which is more of an orchestrator of the decision, like the AI agent is now a decision maker. Like it is the most sophisticated pattern. Sometimes it is used in the crisis management and also in the supply chain planning also. Here the agents is not just doing some random task. It is facilitating, I will say, a war room, a kind of a war room. It pulls the data from, say, suppose 20 systems and identifies a conflict, say, suppose um, a contradiction for the same metric, uh, where a system is marking inventory as a low, but the same metric, when used in a different system with the same values, it is showing inventory as high, right? So it identifies those conflicts and it presents an option to a group of humans, and it says like, hey, option A probably will cost like 10K, um, because it is fast, given the inventory scenario, but option B is maybe much more cheaper, uh, but there is a trade-off here. We have to be slow in this. So it gives you those critical informations. And then and there itself, the human will debate there, right? The agent, when those debates will happen, the agent listens and it will update the model. So this is a far cry, I will say, as of now. There is a lot of things going in this. This is very sophisticated. There are a lot of feedbacks, recalculations. It is a circular loop of reasoning. It happens. Agent is definitely not a worker in this case. It is kind of an officer which is providing intelligence to the different people who are working on the ground here. But this pattern is much more far cry, as I said. It will take time for us to grow and reach that. But most of us are at pattern 1, if you ask me, and we are also prototyping pattern 2 and 3. Hopefully this year, maybe next year, we will be there. With that, I'll just quickly move to because we talked about the prototyping, I just want to give you a picture about how this impacts across the automation lifecycle. Like we talked about what agents do in the business. Now I need to talk to the builders in the room. Like this slide is how agents can change the way we build, run, and fixes the business. And we are definitely witnessing the death of the blank page in the software development. And if you look at this timeline, it tells the story of the last 2 years and probably also the next 2 years, which is coming into play. Phase 1 is all about emerging AI agents, the CoPilot era, which is the first column. This is where many of you were in 2024 or 2025. You deployed AI assistants. In your IDEs, you generate a code to praise this CSV file, and the AI did it, right? This accelerated the development cycle for sure, and it made your developers maybe 30% much more faster. But the process, it remains the same. You have to write requirements. You opened an IDE, you coded, you deployed the code. The AI role was just kind of a fast keyboard there, nothing beyond that, right? The phase 2 is around the autonomous AI agent, the 12 to 24 months. Like this is the middle column. This is where we are entering now into 2026. We have already entered, in fact. And if you see the shift in the language, the AI agents, they are now creating like automation apps. So we are no longer asking the AI to write a function. We are saying, I need just giving the same example, an employee onboarding app. We need to collect the tax forms for all the employees, or maybe provisioning a laptop via ServiceNow API and schedule probably a welcome lunch for anyone who is getting onboarded on day 1, right? So the agent doesn't just write the code here, it scaffolds the entire solution. It generates the schema, the databases, it creates the databases. In fact, it creates the API connectors, it drafts the UI for you, and it also creates a first draft application in front of you. And this, in my opinion, has and will change the role of our developers, because we are no longer going to be, the developers are not I mean, they'll not be working as a bricklayers, laying the code line by line. They will now become editor-in-chief. Like their job will be mostly to review the agent's draft, check the um, security governance, refine the logic, and probably also hit the publish button if they'll all find it right. And we are seeing a shift from the human author to an agent author, human verified system, like keeping the human in the loop. That is definitely happening, and I think in over a period of time this will become much more stronger. The third one is AI agents at a scale, where we are going for a self-hearing phase or maybe era, which is the far right column. I don't think in 2026 or 2027 we'll be able to achieve this, but maybe somewhere beyond that, we are definitely looking for this specifics. Like if you focus on the way it has been stated, if you see in the old world, like optimization was a quarterly project. Like you hired a consultant, they did the process mining, they gave you a report. 6 months later, you fixed a bottleneck, right? But in this state, in this future state, probably the agent is continuously monitoring the live logs. It will see a pattern, say like, hey, every time we process an invoice from vendor X, it fails and it requires human intervention, and the agent just don't log the error, it proposes the fix also, right? It will say like, I have detected a pattern, I have drafted a new parsing rule for vendor X, here is the simulation of how it would perform, and do you want me to deploy this change, right? And this is a continuous improvement in my opinion, and it is running on an autopilot, so there will be a lot of architectural consequences in this, right? And if you see the colored boxes in this stack, notice how the blue box, the deterministic automation, it gets compressed over the time, and the purple box, which is the AI agent, it expands. Like we are moving toward a world where the hard-coded layer, it becomes smaller and smaller, and the agent, it takes over the orchestration, the interface also, and eventually it will do the continuous evolution of the software. I will move quickly to the next slide in the interest of the time.
Can you share a bit what frameworks do you use? For example, you mentioned the coding agent. So did you any experience that you can share regarding that? And also like the frameworks of the orchestrations? Are you using like any open source or maybe the cloud offering?
Currently in my organization, we have a lot of, so I deal with emerging technologies, and I also work very closely with the research units. So the open source frameworks are there, but I'm not working on that, to be honest, because it is very Fujitsu specific. It is based on the research which we have created. And all those frameworks are kind of proprietary, and that has been created over a period of time, and now we are laying this framework into the market, but not flashing them. Rather, that is a layer which we are putting beneath the applications, or maybe the value which we are providing it to them. To answer your question, it is proprietary to us from the Fujitsu standpoint, and I mean, as of now, we are just using some of the frameworks which are being created by our Fujitsu research team. So probably I'll not be able to answer this question because I will overlay some extra information, which I should not do that. But yeah, there are a lot of frameworks available in the market. And to be honest, I was working on one of the framework which was there last quarter, which was open source, but I don't see now that also come into play. So it gets outdated. It is getting outdated a lot. I will say, based on my experience, the solid framework, like the normal coding standards which we follow, right? If we are having those solid principles in place, or the frameworks in place, and making those solid principles coming together for the agents as well, I think we are in a good shape. But if it is not following the solid principles, when I say solid, it's not solid, extra solid, SOLID, maybe search about it. It's single responsibility, open and closed. Um, um, there is a lot of things which you can explore and find about the solid principles. Those principles are some of the key principles which I always try to see whenever a framework is generated, and I make sure that those follow the solid principles, right? So the frameworks can change. Today it may work, but in another 6 months it may not even work. But make sure your principles, the guiding principles, the solid principles are there. Um, and those should be the building blocks for your frameworks. If your framework changes, that should not change your principles there. Okay, I will resume from the, and I think I just have 5 minutes, so I will just quickly touch upon the solution architecture automation. So
maybe last slide, and then we can give like 3-4 minutes to questions. If
sure. Okay. Yeah, I will quickly wrap this up. This is very. I mean, I just wanted to show people also here like how things have been changing. The classical model is the leftmost part, and the right side is much more agentic driven, right? So if you look at the arrows, they point down. In the classical model, which is on the left side, we build a database, we wrap it with business logic, we put a shiny React or an Angular interface on the top, and then we wait, right? We wait for the case workers to wake up, drink their coffee, log in, and navigate a menu, maybe filter a list, and pull the work which is assigned to them, right? And if you see, the architecture is very passive in nature. The human is the engine here, the software is the tool. If the UI is bad, the process breaks. If the human forgets to log in, the process stops. So it's very passive in nature. And we have been spending a lot in this space. But if you see on the right side, the agentic automation, this is the inversion of the control which is happening. If you notice the arrows, they are pointing up now, like the agent doesn't wait. The agent is much more active. It's a persistent loop which is running against the data management layer. It is monitoring the state of your business 24/7. When a condition is made, for example, say suppose a new claim arrives, or maybe a stock level drops, or maybe an anomaly is detected, the agent grabs that specific task and it tries to solve it itself. If it cannot, then it updates the system of records, or maybe inform a specific human to get involved into it, right? So it definitely brings the task to the human, and it doesn't say like log into SAP and just goes from there, right? It sends you a micro Slack card or maybe notifications or some generated form which user can read through, understand it, take necessary decision, or maybe if approvals are required, even attach an approval to it, and probably then and there the state is updated, right? So this means that the user interface is no longer a static monolithic structure. It is ephemeral, it is fluid. The API is no longer just a data pipe, it is primarily the interface of your digital workforce. If your APIs are messy, undocumented, hidden behind a GUI, your agents are definitely blind. And in agentic era, API documentation, I feel, is the much more important than even designing a UI UX, right? Because if your agents cannot read the map, it cannot even drive that, right? So then and there itself it will fail. So you have to make things agnostic to what agents are looking out for. So your system needs to be compliant with that. I'll just touch upon the challenges. These are very real challenges, and it would be irresponsible if I don't state these. Transparency, definitely we should make sure we are creating highly transparent systems. We need to build observability tools which explains why agent made a decision. There should be explainable AI on the top of the agents so that they help us understand why those specific decisions were taken, right? So There's number one. Second one is compliance. You need to have um, all the necessary privacy laws. They should be the guardrail for you. They should sit between the LLM and the action layer to block any kind of dangerous commands. And it shouldn't be an afterthought. Rather, it should be the first starting point for us to get started with. And lastly, there has to be an accountability. Like if an agent does something which it should not do, who is responsible? Is it the developer or the prompt engineer or the vendor, right? You must need to establish those RACI frameworks or the decision who is responsible in which particular situation for a particular task before even going into production, right? So with that, I will just conclude it. I know I'm just right on time. Thank you for listening to me, but I'm now opening to the questions. Please feel free to ask questions as much as possible.
Thank you so much, Deepu, for your time. Shai, maybe you want to share about how to use LangChain 4J?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. Where's my camera? So it's fairly early in the process now, but we're doing this for developing an agent that is using multiple internal tools, and we're using LangChain 4J to register all the tools and then create a plan how to use these tools.
Are you using knowledge graphs for that?
Sorry?
Are you using knowledge graphs?
So right now we are just using the documentation of each API. We document it, we put it in a good prompt and explain what the tool can do, and then let Log4j do the job. Still, we have a short number of tools, so I hope it will be able to grow with us, but if not, we may need to do something more sophisticated. And we saw that there are extensions for LangChain that enable it to do this and describe it more.
Yeah, I mean, I think LangChain has pretty vast extensions and dependencies, so you can definitely optimize and bring much more things. And it changes very frequently, so just stay up to date to their versions. I think that is a guiding principle with the LangChain.
Shayo, I want to ask a question. So I'm coming back to planning. It's something that feels like maybe it's in my head that it's missing, which is how do you tune this? Like, okay, if you just delegate it completely to the LLM and it figures out the plan of action, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. But I'm looking for a feedback loop, like it's trying something and then you're telling it didn't do it well, and then it learns over time. Is there like a feedback loop there?
So agents create. So if you see the architecture, right, it is a master and a worker architecture, and what it creates there will be a master who will lay in a task or maybe a particular goal, and there will be like multiple executors or maybe workers who will be taking up that. And what they do is they fight between themselves, right? And they will try to understand, okay, what is the best way of doing this, right? So for worker X, it will say like, I can do this based on the source of information which I have. I will be doing this in 1, 2, 3 ways, right? The worker Y will say similar thing, but with similar set of tasks, or maybe jumbled up tasks, or maybe it will add more tasks to it, right? And worker Z will say like, okay, I will do all of these in 10 different tasks, right? They actually then gets combined, and the master, it actually understands, the agent master, it understands this is, I mean, it will actually curate all of them. It will try to merge all of them. It will take the best call, and it will do a reasoning like a normal thinking models which we have, right? It does the thinking approach there. It understands, it evaluates based on the data which it has acquired. It will give you the maybe initially it had only like 10 work activities, it will probably combine 2 or 3 activities into one, and maybe just say like, these are the 8 steps which you need to create as an action plan, and then lay it over, right? So
maybe, yeah, maybe being naive, but I don't think we're at level 5 autonomous driving car. And
no, we are not.
I'm not sure where